we really have a very special show for you. I will take up a very tricky topic, and that is America's military effort in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And by the end of the hour, not only will you know more useful information about what's going on over there, we're actually going to take you live to Kabul to talk with a very special guest, a very important guest, Colonel Tim Kirk, who is, interestingly enough, one of my oldest Facebook friends. And a lot of folks know that Jay, the host of the show, Jay McNally, and I became friends through Facebook. We were introduced, let's say, by Russell Kirk, and a lot of folks are now familiar with who Russell Kirk is. Russell Kirk is one of the founding fathers, let's say, of American conservatism. Michigan's own Russell Kirk was a man that Reagan said was the prophet of American conservatism. Kirk was one of Reagan's favorite philosophers, and Reagan said that Kirk, in his home in library in Mecosta, Michigan, atop Piety Hill, Kirk reached deep into the roots of American values, writing and editing central works of political philosophy, and his intellectual contribution has been a profound act of patriotism. And you can learn more about Russell Kirk, Michigan's own Russell Kirk, at kirkcenter.org, where you can find many of his published works. But Kirk was a true Michigan man. He was raised on the wrong side of the tracks in Plymouth, Michigan, and Jay came across the Kirks in the 70s and became a personal friend of the family. And so when Jay's daughter had been friends with me online, she turned to her dad. She says, "Dad, you got to see what this guy Darren's doing online with Russell Kirk." And so Jay and I became fast friends, and over the years, of course, now I'm just really honored to be a part of his show. And it's interesting to point out that that's also how Colonel Kirk, Colonel Tim Kirk, also known as Tamir Khan, and I became friends as well through Facebook. And so the man with whom we'll be talking today from Kabul is a Russell Kirkian. Now, the reason I mention Russell Kirk is because Russell is a guy that was certainly no neocon. In fact, he attacked the neocons pretty regularly, almost as much as he attacked the libertarians. But one thing that Russell felt very strongly about, it's often joked that Dr. Kirk was against entering every war in which America found itself, including the first one against the British. And so, although he was not an isolationist, Russell Kirk was definitely someone who helped propagate the idea of a humble and prudent foreign policy. And so it's very interesting as we go forward here as Kirkians to talk about some of the big struggles that we have overseas. A lot of us feel that America has made some very bad mistakes militarily overseas. We've stretched ourselves too far. We've taken our eye off the ball. We've tried to get involved in too many things that didn't have America's national interests at heart. And so we're going to be talking about some of that stuff with my friend and a man that I have tremendous respect for, Colonel Tim Kirk. Is Colonel Kirk with us?
I'm here, Darren. How's it going?
It's going great. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thanks, brother. The pleasure and honor is all mine, and I sure appreciate you guys taking a few minutes to talk to us here in Afghanistan. This is a real treat.
Well, it is. We're certainly honored to have you on. You are the senior Afghan hand in the International Security Assistance Force, the ISAF, Combined Joint Interagency Task Force, or Shafafayet, which means transparency. It is the Anti-Corruption Task Force. Is that now? Are you able to fit all of that on a business card?
No, I tried. The font just gets too tricky.
In addition to that, you're also the chief of the civil society branch responsible for counterinsurgency or the anti-corruption efforts element of the COIN strategy. And you're also, you've got a couple degrees, but significantly we should point out that you're a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, a former squadron commander, as well as a former speechwriter for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who has just retired. And so you've worn lots of hats over there. So help us kind of understand, first of all, what your role is as the senior Afghan hand in the International Security Assistance Force Combined Joint Interagency Task Force for Transparency and Anti-Corruption.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'd first like to say that you'll notice nowhere in there was like military spokesman or anything like that. I certainly like to talk about these issues as an Afghan hand, but I don't have any talking points or anything like that in the sense of I'm just glad to share thoughts from my own experience here rather than anything, official or sanctioned. The Afghan Hands Program has been a real success here, and it was kind of the vision of General McChrystal and Admiral Mullen and General Petraeus that over the years of working in Afghanistan, they learned the importance of language and culture to the Afghan people. And unfortunately, the American way of war these days is to put people on a rotation system that compresses their time in theater down to either 6 months or 9 months or at the most a year. And unfortunately, even a year is just long enough to figure out where all the bathrooms are, as we say. And, that's not enough time to learn the language, understand the culture, and really more importantly, to build relationships with the Afghan people. And if you know anything about Afghanistan, relationships are everything. And just the special nature of the culture here really dictates that if you want to see progress in anything, it all depends upon cultural respect, language, and relationships. And so those gentlemen created the Afghan Hands Program to dedicate members of each of the services for a 5-year period and teach them language and culture before they came over, and then keep them on a rotation basis dedicated, as opposed to someone who might come here for a year and then not come back again, or maybe they don't come back for 3 or 4 years. The Afghan Hands come here for a year, rotate out for a year, and then come back to the same place for a year, and vice versa for 5 years. So 3 out of 5 years spent in country. And that has really helped build our understanding of the problem here, build the relationships that are necessary in order to do something about the problems here. And I'm very pleased to be a part of that program. When I was writing for Admiral Mullen, as you mentioned, I did a lot of work on the initial foundational documents for the idea and just really became a believer based upon what I knew of Afghan culture and Afghan society previously. And so when the time came and I had the opportunity to go, I took it, and it's just been a real honor ever since. I've been here in Afghanistan since June of 2010, and you'll notice that's a little bit longer than a year. I volunteered to stay, and volunteered to stay actually until 2014 because of those relationships that I've built, and really the intractability of the problem that we're dealing with in our task force, that of corruption. As you all know from the donor nations perspective in the recent conference at Bonn, as well as in America, the attention being paid to the corruption problems here is indicative of the nature and extent of that problem, with so many countries donating billions of dollars a year to the reconstruction effort here. Corruption is a fatal threat to our mission. And so, as I've had the opportunity to work on that problem, I've found that the relationships that we've built in order to fix it with what we like to call the good guys, the guys who believe in good governance, rule of law, transparency, and accountability, has just been tremendous. And I think the video you were referring to at the top of the show was the video that I posted about an event that we held at the American University of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
We were helping to empower college students to stand up against the corruption problem and really get young, fresh Afghan solutions to these problems.
And we're talking with Colonel Tim Kirk here on WHAM 1600's The American Dream with Jay McNally show. Colonel Kirk is kind of at the tip of the spear of the anti-corruption efforts. He's one of the Afghan Hands and interagency force working in Kabul. And, of course, one of the things that is so very important to understand about Afghanistan, and it's important that we understand their history if we're going to understand the situation, is that Afghanistan has been war-torn for 3 decades. And for until the new government was brought into power in 2001 and the Taliban was ousted, for 20 years, essentially, Afghanistan has been a lawless country. And so there were no institutions of law. And frankly, a lot of the folks that were initially brought on as judges and as police, they were corrupt as well. And so you've really got your work cut out there for you, because between the people cultivating the poppies and all of that drug money that's not only funding the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda and the insurgency, but also it's being used to, let's face it, to cook the books and corrupt the system for the same old line of just regular old political power there on the ground. And so tell us about how particularly this latest program in which you've graduated some folks with the American University there in Afghanistan. Tell us about what it is that they are learning to help build these institutions and to have a justice system that has law and order that is transparent and not corrupt.
Yes, everything that you described is absolutely accurate and very important to understanding the problem here. Our task force stood up just about 15 months ago to handle the corruption problem and reaching a common understanding of the problem, and initially to go after the bad guys. I joined the task force in January of this year and saw what was going on with going after the bad guys, but we started to think, you know what, let's say we take out all the bad guys, what do we replace them with? Yeah. We really need to simultaneously be building the good guys, and let's go out and find where the good guys are, if they exist, and then invest in them with education and empowering information and organization and networking and so forth. So that's what my branch is responsible for. We go out and find the good guys in Afghanistan, and trust me, there are a lot of them. In fact, Afghans unanimously report that they see corruption as the number one problem facing Afghanistan, and you can't walk down the street and talk to people without it becoming a point in the conversation. Just earlier this week, I was walking down the street, and this old gentleman heard me speaking Dari, and he walked up to me and said, "Okay, I know you can understand me, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I can." And he said, "Okay, we need to talk about corruption." And he just started going on for about 20 minutes about how the corruption problem affects him. So it's on the minds of the people, and there really are some good guys out there, and that's what we're doing at the university, is finding the young students who are educated, interested, feel a passion for fixing the problem. And then all we do is kind of help focus their thoughts. We had like an essay contest where we awarded guys a certificate for the best essay and the runner-up essays for the work that they did on solving the corruption problem. And we're planning a series of events to help organize the students so that they can have a voice. And we're kind of connecting the local Afghan media and these students so that they get recognized and have a voice on the corruption problem. So
these essays ought to be really interesting to read, to have that perspective of a young person, a young scholar who knows firsthand some of these corruption problems. I mean, are you finding that this requires, first of all, a great deal of courage, but from what I've learned and read about the area, that they're really putting themselves kind of in the firing line of the people who would rather just keep it the old corrupt way that it's been.
Absolutely, and the risks cannot be overstated to these kids that are doing this. But at the same time, the courage of the average Afghan also cannot be overstated. These guys are just impressive. When you look at how they perform, how they write, for example, at the American University, all their classes are in English. And so all these young, sharp guys have learned to speak English and write in English. All the essays were written in English. They're able to articulate some very advanced and complicated ideas outside of their native language. and do so at risk to themselves on top of that. And it's because they believe that the future belongs to them, and they're willing to take a stand. It's really impressive.